Life processes. Introduction. Living things. Although all living things look different from each other, they all have 7 things in common. These 7 things are called life process. Something is only alive if it does all 7 processes. The 7 life processes: move, reproduce, sensitive, nutrition, excrete, respire, grow. All living things move. Animals move their whole bodies to get from one place to another. Plants turn towards the light and their roots grow down into the soil. All living things reproduce. Animals have babies. New plants grow from seeds. All living things are sensitive. All living things respond to changes. Living things notice changes in their surroundings and react to them. Example: plants grow towards the light. People react to the temperature around them. All living things need nutrition. Food is used to provide energy. Green plants make their own food using sunlight. Animals eat plants or other animals. All living things excrete. Waste substances must be removed from the body. Plants and animals both need to get rid of waste, gas and water. All living things respire. Plants and animals use the oxygen in the air to turn food into energy. All living things grow. Babies grow into adults. Seedlings grow into plants. What are life processes? The maintenance functions of living organisms must go on even when they are not doing anything particular. Example: even if we are just asleep, even when we are just sitting in class, the processes which together perform this maintenance job are life processes. Since these maintenance processes are needed to prevent damage and breakdown, energy is needed for them. Nutrition. When we walk or ride a bicycle, we are using up energy. Even when we are not doing any apparent activity, energy is needed to maintain a state of order in our body. We also need materials from outside in order to grow, develop, synthesize protein and other substance needed in the body. This source of energy and materials is the food we eat. How do living things get their food? The general requirement for energy and materials is common in all organisms, but it is fulfilled in different ways. Some organisms use simple food material obtained from inorganic sources in the form of carbon dioxide and water. These organisms, the autotrophs, include green plants and some bacteria. Other organisms utilize complex substances. These complex substances have to be broken down into simpler ones before they can be used for the upkeep and growth of the body. To achieve this, organisms use biocatalysts called enzymes. Thus, the heterotroph's survival depends directly or indirectly on autotrophs. Heterotrophic organisms include animals and fungi. Autotrophic nutrition. Carbon and energy requirements of the autotrophic organism are fulfilled by photosynthesis. It is the process by which autotrophs take in substances from the outside and convert them into stored forms of energy. Let us now see what actually happens during the process of photosynthesis. Stomata, which are tiny pores present on the surface of the leaves. Massive amounts of gaseous exchange take place in the leaves through these pores for the purpose of photosynthesis. But it is important to note here that exchange of gases occurs across the surface of stems, roots and leaves as well. Since large amounts of water can also be lost through these stomata, the plant closes these pores when it does not need carbon dioxide for photosynthesis. The opening and closing of the pore is a function of the guard cells. The guard cells swell when water flows into them, causing the stomatal pore to open. Now, let us study how the plant obtains carbon dioxide. Heterotrophic nutrition. Each organism is adapted to its environment. The form of nutrition differs depending on type and availability of food material as well as how it is obtained by the organism. For example, whether the food source is stationary such as grass or mobile such as a deer would allow for differences in how the food is accessed and what is the nutritive apparatus used by a cow and a lion. There is a range of strategies by which the food is taken in and used by the organism. Some organisms break down the food material outside the body and then absorb it. Others take in whole material and break it down inside their bodies. What can be taken in and broken down depends on the body design and functioning. How do organisms obtain their nutrition? Since the food and the way it is obtained differ, the digestive system is different in various organisms. In single-celled organisms, the food may be taken in by the entire surface. But as the complexity of the organism increases, different parts become specialized to perform different functions. For example, amoeba takes in food using temporary finger-like extensions of the cell's surface which fuse over the food particle, forming a food vacuole. Inside the food vacuole, complex substances are broken down into simpler ones which then diffuse into the cytoplasm. The remaining undigested material is moved to the surface of the cell and thrown out. Nutrition in human beings. The alimentary canal is basically a long tube extending from the mouth to the anus. We eat various types of food which has to pass through the same digestive tract. Naturally, the food has to be processed to generate particles which are small and of the texture. This is achieved by crushing food with our teeth. Since the lining of the canal is soft, the food is also wetted to make its passage smooth. When we eat something we like, our mouth waters. This is actually not only water, but a fluid called saliva secreted by the salivary glands. Another aspect of the food we ingest is its complex nature. If it is to be absorbed from the alimentary canal, it has to be broken into smaller molecules. This is done with the help of biological catalysts called enzymes. The saliva contains an enzyme called salivary amylase that breaks down starch, which is a complex molecule, to give sugar. The food is mixed thoroughly with saliva and moved around the mouth while chewing by the muscular tongue. It is necessary to move the food in a regulated manner along the digestive tube so that it can be processed properly in each part. The lining of canal has muscles that contract rhythmically in order to push the food forward. These peristaltic movements occur all along the gut. From the mouth, the food is taken to the stomach through the food pipe or esophagus. The stomach is a large organ which expands when food thoroughly with more digestive juices. These digestion functions are taken care of by the gastric glands present in the wall of the stomach. These release hydrochloric acid, a protein digesting enzyme called pepsin, and mucus. The hydrochloric acid creates an acidic medium which facilitates the action of the enzyme pepsin. The exit of food from the stomach is regulated by a sphincter muscle which releases it in small amounts into the small intestine. From the stomach, the food now enters the small intestine. This is the longest part of the alimentary canal, which is fitted into a compact space because of extensive coiling. The digested food is taken up by the walls of the intestine. The inner lining of the small intestine has numerous finger-like projections called villi, which increases the surface area for absorption. The villi are richly supplied with blood vessels which take the absorbed food to each and every cell of the body, where it is utilized for obtaining energy, building up new tissues, and the repair of old tissues. The unabsorbed food is sent into the large intestine where more villi absorb water from this material. The rest if the material is removed from the body via the anus. The exit of this waste material is regulated by the anal sphincter. Respiration. Diverse organisms use oxygen to break down glucose completely into carbon dioxide and water. Some use other pathways that do not involve oxygen. In all cases, the first step is the breakdown of glucose, a 6-carbon molecule, into a 3-carbon dioxide. This process takes place in yeast during fermentation. Since this process takes place in the absence of air, it is called anaerobic respiration. Breakdown of pyruvate using oxygen takes place in the mitochondria. This process breaks up the 3-carbon pyruvate molecule to give 3 molecules of carbon dioxide. The other product is water. Since this process takes place, in the presence of air, it is called aerobic respiration. Since the aerobic respiration pathway depends on oxygen, aerobic organisms need to ensure that there is sufficient intake of oxygen. We have seen that plants exchange gases through stomata, and the large intercellular spaces ensure that all cells are in contact with air. Carbon dioxide and oxygen are exchanged by diffusion here. They can go into cells or away from them and out into the air. The direction of diffusion depends upon the environmental conditions and the requirements of the plant. At night, when there is no photosynthesis occurring, carbon dioxide elimination is the major exchange activity going on. During the day, carbon dioxide generated during respiration is used up for photosynthesis. Hence, there is no carbon dioxide release. Instead, oxygen release is the major event at this time. Animals have evolved different organs for the uptake of oxygen from the environment and for getting rid of the carbon dioxide produced. Terrestrial animals can breathe the oxygen in the atmosphere, but animals that live in water need the oxygen dissolved in water. Since the amount of dissolved oxygen is fairly low compared to the amount of oxygen in the air, the rate of breathing in aquatic organisms is much faster than that seen in terrestrial organisms. Fishes take in water through their mouths and force it past the gills, where the dissolved oxygen is taken up by blood. In human beings, air is taken into the body through the nostrils. The air passing through the nostrils is filtered by fine hairs that line the passage. The passage is also lined with mucus, which helps in this process. From here, the air passes through the throat. This ensures that the air passage does not collapse. Within the lungs, the passage divides into smaller and smaller tubes, which finally terminate in balloon-like structures, which are called alveoli. The alveoli provide a surface where the exchange of gases can take place. The walls of the alveoli contain an extensive network of blood vessels. As we have seen in earlier years, when we breathe in, we lift our ribs and flatten our diaphragm, and the chest cavity becomes larger as a result. Because of this, air is sucked into the lungs and fills the expanded alveoli. The blood brings carbon dioxide from the rest of the body for release into the alveoli, and the oxygen in the alveolar blood vessels need to be transported to all the cells in the body. During the breathing cycle, when air is taken in and let out, the lungs always contain a residual volume of air so that there is sufficient time for oxygen to be absorbed and for the carbon dioxide to be released. When the body size of animals is large, the diffusion pressure alone cannot take care of oxygen delivery to all parts of the body. Instead, respiratory pigments take up oxygen from the air in the lungs and carry it to tissues which are deficient in oxygen before releasing it. In human beings, the respiratory pigment is hemoglobin, which has a very high affinity for oxygen. This pigment is present in the red blood corpuscles. Carbon dioxide is more soluble in water than oxygen is and hence is mostly transported in the dissolved form in our blood. Transportation. Transportation in human beings. Blood transports food, oxygen and waste materials in our bodies. Blood consists of a fluid medium called plasma in which the cells are suspended. Plasma transports food, carbon dioxide and nitrogenous waste in dissolved form. Oxygen is carried by the red blood cells. Many other substances like salts are also transported by the blood. We thus need a pumping organ to push blood around the body, a network of tubes to reach all the tissues, and a system in place to ensure that this network can be repaired if damaged. Our pump, the heart. The heart is a muscular organ which is as big as our fist. Because both oxygen and carbon dioxide have to be transported by the blood, the heart has different chambers to prevent the oxygen-rich blood from mixing with the blood containing carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide-rich blood has to reach the lungs for the carbon dioxide to be removed, and the oxygenated blood from the lungs has to be brought back to the heart. This oxygen-rich blood is then pumped to the rest of the body. Oxygen-rich blood from the lungs comes to the thin-walled upper chamber of the heart on the left atrium. The left atrium relaxes when it is collecting this blood. It then contracts while the next chamber, the left ventricle, expands so that the blood is transferred to it. When the muscular left ventricle contracts in turn, the blood is pumped out to the body. Deoxygenated blood comes from the body to the upper chamber on the right atrium as it expands. As the right ventricle dilates, this transfers blood to the right ventricle, which in turn pumps it to the lungs for oxygenation. Since ventricles have to pump blood into various organs, they have thicker muscular walls than the atria do. Valves ensure that blood does not flow backwards when the atria or ventricles contract. Transportation in plant. We have discussed earlier how plants take in simple compounds such as carbon dioxide and photosynthesis energy stored in their chlorophyll-containing organs, namely leaves. The other kinds of raw materials needed for building plant bodies will also have to be taken up separately. The soil is the nearest and richest source of raw materials like nitrogen, phosphorus and other minerals. The absorption of these substances therefore occurs through the part in contact with soil, namely roots. If the distances between soil contacting organs and chlorophyll containing organs are small, energy and raw materials can easily diffuse to all parts of the plant body. But if these distances become large because of changes in plant body design, diffusion processes will not be sufficient to provide raw materials in leaves and energy in roots. Transport of water. In xylem tissue, vessels and tracheids of the roots, stems and leaves are interconnected to form a continuous system of water-conducting channels reaching all parts of the plant. At the roots, cells in contact with the soil actively take up ions. This creates a difference in the concentration of these ions between the root and the soil. Water therefore moves into the root from the soil to eliminate this difference. This means that there is steady movement of water into root xylem, creating a column of water that is steadily pushed upwards. Provided that the plant has an adequate supply of water, the water which is lost through the stomata is replaced by water from the xylem vessels in the leaf. In fact, evaporation of water molecules from the cells of a leaf creates a suction which pulls water from the xylem cells' roots. The loss of water in the form of vapor from the aerial parts of the plant is known as transpiration. Thus, transpiration helps in the absorption and upwards movement of water and minerals dissolved in it from roots to the leaves. It also helps in temperature regulation. The effect of root pressure in the transport of water is more important at night. During the day, when the stomata are open, the transpiration pull becomes the major driving force in the movement of water in the xylem. Excretion. Excretion in human beings. The excretory system of human beings includes a pair of kidneys, a pair of ureters, a urinary bladder, and a urethra. Kidneys are located in the abdomen, one on either side of the backbone. Urine produced in the kidneys passes through the ureters into the urinary bladder, where it is stored until it is released through the urethra. The purpose of making urine is to filter out waste products from the blood in the lungs. Nitrogenous waste such as urea or uric acid are removed from blood in the kidneys. It is then no surprise that the basic filtration unit in the kidneys, like in the lungs, is a cluster of very thin-walled blood capillaries. Each capillary cluster in the kidney is associated with the cup-shaped end of a tube that collects the filtered urine. Each kidney has large numbers of these filtration units called nephrons packed close together. Some substances in the initial filtrate, such as glucose, amino acids, salts, and a major amount of water, are selectively reabsorbed as the urine flows along the tube. The amount of water reabsorbed depends on how much excess water there is in the body and on how much of dissolved waste there is to be excreted. The urine formed in each kidney eventually enters a long tube, the ureter, which connects the kidneys with the urinary bladder. Urine is stored in the urinary bladder until the pressure of the expanded bladder leads to the urge to pass it out through the urethra. The bladder is muscular, so it is under nervous control, as we have discussed elsewhere. As results, we can usually control the urge to urinate.